Well, it's difficult to know where to start when we're discussing the creation of an effective spiritual assessment. There is no standard. There's no one-size-fits-all model for assessments. Some chaplain departments use them, but many do not. Terms and definition of words are going to vary from setting to setting. The assessment process and the charting requirements in a major hospital or hospice facility, well, they'll be wildly different from a disaster response chaplain or first responder setting or others. Most chaplains are simply not trained in spiritual assessments. Rather, what they're given is a list of mnemonics, like hope, FICA, or FACT, to help them remember some spiritual questions to ask. These are great tools for remembering questions. They're useful for making a spiritual survey. But by themselves, these are not spiritual assessments. There are a variety of approaches to making a spiritual survey that can be developed into a fuller assessment, one that would include a pastoral diagnosis, plan of care and follow-up, and also pastoral care notes that are appropriate to the context of your work as a chaplain. Now, most of the teaching on this subject comes from clinical settings, a hospital environment. That's a result of the genesis of CPE training. But the problem is that most chaplains work in settings outside of clinical or hospitals. Board-certified chaplains are no longer limited to a hospital-type setting. Since there is no generally accepted standard for spiritual assessments, you will be presented with a whole variety of approaches. It will be up to you to design and use an assessment process that works for you in your context. So, will you serve in a predominantly Christian setting or completely secular one? This will require you to choose your words carefully and make use of language that explains spiritual care concepts, but in terms that can be understood by your clients and colleagues and your constituents. Will you work in a large VA or other hospital that already has established protocols in place? Or a rural or regional hospital that is new to having chaplains on staff? Will you serve in a nursing home, hospice, police, fire, church setting? Will you serve the homeless population or people with mental health needs? How will you remember conversations and needs of the people that you care for? Every possible setting will require you to learn how to engage in culturally acceptable ways while engaging in the important spiritual care you provide as a Christian chaplain. You'll need to be expert in communicating to understand, expert in the various religions and beliefs that are represented by the people you serve. You'll need to be expert in listening rather than fixing, expert in listening to story and asking seriously curious questions, and importantly, expert in conducting spiritual surveys and full spiritual assessments so that a proper pastoral diagnosis and a plan of care can be created for those who accept your offer of care and relationship. How you do this, well, that will be mostly up to you. Now, some of you will be working in a large hospital or hospice environment. You will likely need to learn the system of spiritual assessment, documentation, and charting that they already have in place. But most of you will need to create your own. Now, you'll find a great book recommendation and PDF documents available in your class material for further study as your needs require. I encourage you to download those PDFs, get them on your computer, and read them. Approaches are going to range from the complex, like Fichet's 7x7 model, which is included, to the very simple one, like the Lewis conversational approach. We'll present several of them in this course as you work to design your own spiritual assessment. You're free to use what you like or even create your own. Just be creative. We do not prescribe a specific method because, well, there isn't one. Generally speaking, there are 6 steps to an effective spiritual assessment that will apply to any setting in which you serve. You should write these 6 steps down and learn them because they're true of every chaplain in every setting. The first step is the entrance. The first is just the initial entrance and introduction. If the person accepts your offer of care and relationship, then you can proceed with step 2, which may take place right away, or it may take place in a follow-up meeting. So step 2, what's that? That's the initial overview, the spiritual survey. In this step, you want to learn about the faith and beliefs and religion and support systems, culture of the person that you serve. This is accomplished with some easy, basic questions that might be represented by acronyms like faith, hope, FICA, or the 4 W's and 1 H. The highest percentage of your contacts will end at step 1 or 2. Not everyone will accept your offer of continued spiritual care that can lead to a thorough spiritual assessment, but it is your job to try and get them there. Then comes the spiritual assessment itself. For those who allow you to continue, you proceed to this step 3 and engage in a more thorough spiritual assessment process. In some clinical settings, you'll be required to complete an assessment, even though it may not be very thorough because you didn't have the time. You will use their terms and their jargon as required. This is important to document so that the team can gain information, as limited as it may be, and that the setting can be reimbursed by properly billing for your chaplain services. Many see no value in these forms, but they're important, so be thorough and be professional. Then comes pastoral diagnosis and treatment. The assessment should lead to the creation of a pastoral diagnosis along with a care and treatment plan that's recommended for this person's spiritual health for a positive outcome. How will you bring spiritual care that is suitable to their needs? Who will you coordinate with? What does your team need to know about this person? Who might you refer to? What volunteers might you deploy? What will they be asked to do? Then comes follow-up for positive outcome. If they agree to your recommendations for follow-up, then you will coordinate others to help you produce that positive result. And then the care continues until the need is no longer there or the client is simply no longer available to you. Every chaplain encounter will have an entrance, and everyone will also have an exit. So that's the final step, the exit. That's when your work is done. You exit the chaplain relationship while still hoping and praying for a longer-term friendship and a connection that might continue in some way. At the exit, of course, we hope that the person has been drawn to Christ. In reality, only a very few people will reach this step on your watch. So how will you measure the results of your spiritual care? Positive outcomes, after all, should be measured. They should be documented and communicated. This is especially important in a clinical setting where you must learn to work professionally with other members of the interdisciplinary team. And so what results can be measured? How can we identify expected outcomes and, over time, measure the effectiveness of the work that we do as chaplains? Well, the truth is that our profession needs to prove itself. In secular settings of every type, management, HR, and staff will likely mostly be non-Christian, and the big question to them becomes, how can we benefit from having chaplains? With budgets being extremely tight, funding the additional cost of staff chaplains can be a tough pill for them to swallow. And so I get questions all the time about demonstrating effectiveness of spiritual care that are provided by chaplains. Why should we hire a chaplain with our limited resources? And well, the answer has been difficult to provide until recently. Perhaps the premier researcher for spiritual care effectiveness in clinical settings is Dr. Harold Koenig. You should look his name up. He's the professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Duke University Department of Medicine. He is a staunch supporter and advocate for chaplaincy. His significant involvement in documenting positive outcomes for chaplaincy is really quite compelling. He participated in a very compelling new research project conducted by Harvard University on the impact of religion and spiritual care in clinical settings. This newly published work details nearly 25 years of research with tens of thousands of people who've been the recipients of spiritual care provided by people of faith. At a conference in South Carolina in 2022, I had the pleasure of meeting and hearing his presentation and talking to him. And he gave me permission to include a copy of a slide presentation which is available to you in this course as a PDF document. The full textbook, which is rather extensive and expensive, is highly recommended for your chaplain library. It will help you answer the skeptics about the need to have chaplains on staff. It's called The Handbook of Religion and Health, 3rd edition, Oxford University Press, 2022. The work is setting the field of psychiatry and medicine upside down. It turns out we do have major impact on positive patient outcomes. For many, proof of this is unexpected. After all, nobody expected that it would be possible to prove the value of spiritual care because to them it's too subjective. Nonetheless, the work is compelling and it's a valuable resource. Institutions and government are looking for empirical and scientifically measurable evidence to make person-centered spiritual care that is both consistent and measurable, using science to measure those results. Many practitioners in the field are shocked by the concluding evidence. So I had the opportunity to ask Dr. Koenig face-to-face, how much of the spiritual care in this research was provided by people of the Christian faith, I asked. And he responded, leaning forward with a big smile on his Christian face, saying, Jim, it was 90% from within the Christian faith and worldview. So this makes the result even more compelling for our ministry, whose stated purpose is to return chaplaincy to its Christian roots. And so what are some examples that can be gleaned from this research? It's years in the making, conducted with thousands of people on multiple continents. Well, here is just a few examples, just a few of the specific consequences and benefits of chaplaincy and spiritual care on physical and mental health outcomes. Let's start with depression. This is one of the most common emotional disorders in the world. Spiritual care involvement produces less depression and a faster recovery from depression in 61% of the cases. How about suicide? With involvement from people of faith, 75% of patients experience negative attitudes about suicide and less suicidal thoughts and ideations. How about immunity? Well, there's one I wouldn't expect. 56% improvement in immunity and a 74% improvement in endocrine functions. How about cardiovascular? A 57% decrease in blood pressure. 63% improvement in cardiovascular function and 63% reduction in coronary artery disease. How about alcohol and drug abuse and dependence? Well, here too, spiritual care produced an 86% reduction in alcohol use, abuse, and dependence, and an 84% reduction in drug addiction behavior. What about anxiety and PTSD symptoms? There was a 49% decrease in anxiety. How about well-being and happiness? Well, we would expect that one to be measured as an increase, and there was a 79% increase in well-being and happiness. How about impact on social network? An 82% increase in connections with people in an effective social network that held people up and gave them courage. How about marital stability and satisfaction? Yep, here too, an 86% increase in marriage stability, longevity, and satisfaction when people of faith are involved. How about mortality? I wouldn't expect this at all. From all causes, there is a 68% increase in longevity. Apparently, people of faith live longer too. These are just a few of the many findings of this study that baffled the very people who conducted it. If anyone asks you if there is documented evidence to prove our value as chaplains and spiritual care providers, you just say yes and show them the research. Since spiritual care is subjective and difficult to document or quantify, the researchers were in fact surprised by the compelling results. But nevertheless, we are professional chaplains who are still required to document our own positive patient outcomes. We must be advocates for the craft of chaplaincy and the common standards in every setting. The work we do in spiritual care makes a difference in people's lives. We've known that to be true for a very long time, but now there is significant body of evidence to support this truth. But still we need to prove it to those who doubt. We prove it by doing this work with all of our hearts, by caring for people with all our strength, by creating effective spiritual assessments, making accurate pastoral diagnosis, developing a care plan for the client, keeping good notes, documenting our outcomes and results. It is up to you as the staff chaplain to make determinations for yourself about the approach that's most suitable for your worldview and your chaplain style. But outcomes are important. Outcomes must be specific and measurable in order to know if our work is producing effective results where we are. Though highly customizable for your own approach, the 6-step process should always be kept in mind. There is a wide variety of people who serve as chaplains, and so there will be a resulting variety in the types of spiritual assessments that will be used. No matter what approach you adopt, it's important to be able to demonstrate measurable outcomes from our work so that your management and HR and the interdisciplinary team can be shown some tangible results for having you working with them. This is expected of professional, board-certified chaplains. It's part of the common standards for chaplaincy. So please take this seriously.